I guess I will be presenting for group number 1. And share my screen. Okay. So in our initial search page, the search bar is the primary focus here, kind of similar to other search engines such as Google or Bing. And as with other search engines, when you click on the search bar itself, it pulls up the drop down for the most frequently searched keywords in the drop down list. We also added a drop down off to the side of the search bar, allowing the search to be focused on a specific conference in the same manner that popular shopping sites such as Amazon allows you to focus on a department. While our design is meant for novice users, those same users will shortly become expert users. And so we include an advanced search button here that allows you to focus your search on author, the year of publication, number of citations, as well as the paper type. So our results page are based off the standard search results that you'd see on something like Google Scholar, everyone's kind of used to, where you have the paper title, authors, citations, etc. We've also added to that, when you hover over the abstract, for instance, it will pull up the full abstract. This allows you an easy access to the information there. We've also included references link that is built off of the memory model of Google Scholar citations, but instead of displaying the citations for the paper, it will display the list of works that they're referring to or that they cited inside the paper. Lastly, we've added the ability to keep track of existing results. There's a little icon here that will allow you to tag the results and tag authors or other papers from the citations or references by topic to include in future search results.
Okay. First of all, I think I like what you said about having that you're leveraging common interfaces that people are familiar with. I think that's really, really good. One thing I would highlight is if you go back to the original search bar, one thing that I've seen for a lot of students is they might not know what words to search for, right? So even if some common terms that you're thinking about, the academic literature might use a different term for that. So just thinking maybe how to help people who might not know what words to even use, or might not know the difference between Chi or VR or IVA, how to help those folks start to build a mental model about what are common things. Because you said frequently searched keywords, which is great if you know phrases that people commonly use. But if you're trying to search for a phrase, for example, virtual human, or virtual character, virtual agent, embodied conversational agent, you hear all these terms, a beginner might not know that they might be equivalent or not equivalent. Okay, but overall, I think you all did a good job. All right, thank you. And Mohan, again, if you want to jump in, please feel free to. The reminder, we also wanted people to vote on the one they thought was they would want to use the most. And just again, you get just the kudos and your name and lights on Monday. So we'll want to provide that in some way. Okay, group number 2, please. Where do we vote? We're figuring that out. But we have this in recording, so you can quickly zip through and remember all the different ones. All right.
Yep. I'm from group 2, so I will present for my group. And first, we have the mental models pretty good. Same saying, it's like we come from the searches like based on paper and the conference or journal or the specific field the reader want to search. And there's a search bar on the top of the interface for user to type of whatever they want to search, like the keywords or the concept. And on the second level, the user can search based on the journal and the conference or a specific field like AR and VR they want to search. And in the third level, the interface will show up like the search results based on the title of the paper and the image of the overall paper, and the abstract for readers to find if the paper is interesting for them. And this left bar presents specific conference they want to search, and the keywords in the paper, like the concept or the author or something like this, and the year they want to search for the paper. That's all, I think.
Okay. So my comments, it wasn't clear how the mental models were really applied to this. I mean, other than a search approach like you would in Google. I like that you have things by different things such as search by paper, but how is searching by a paper different than searching by a journal, searching by a conference? So I think trying to really think about what is it that again, when you think about a beginner in the field, trying to understand what it is that they are familiar with, because I think for a lot of, for example, beginning students, what's the difference between a conference and a journal? They might be unclear. When would you want to click on one versus another? So I think my feedback here is I think you got a very clean interface, which is very, very good. I like that you search probably similar to other search engines, but really thinking about what is it that students might be struggling with in terms of searching. Because again, like you said, you could always go to Google Scholar. How can yours really build upon that? And do people understand what does search by field, what does search by paper really, really mean? Okay, so I think, so my feedback on this would be to really, you'd probably want to be testing this a lot and really asking people, how do people organize the things they're looking for?
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks. Let's move on to room 3, please.
All right. So this is our group's model that or our UR that we designed.
Yes, you're a little on the soft side. Would you mind?
Whoa, testing. Okay.
Yep.
So our design is based off of more of like a process-based mental model where we're thinking about how we're actually finding the paper. So we're starting, like a lot of us found out that we were starting from like Google or Google Scholar, and from there we're building down to the actual paper topics. And so keeping in mind that this is for a user that doesn't really know too much about the HCI field, we try to keep it simple. And so we wanted everything to be shown on like one page. So what they can do is they can search as usual, but we have the papers that they've actually saved and whatnot on the same page right at the bottom. And then these papers are titled by whatever authors, gives you a summary. We also wanted to attach like images to these little blocks. Like images are from the paper, or a lot of times papers have attachments to them that they might find relevant. And then there's also a filtering tool to help them sort out the different topics that are appearing. When they actually do search, it changes. It remains on the same page, and it swaps out the saved papers with search results. Again, they can bookmark these search results, or they can select the ones that they want and filter as wanted. We also added in an institutional login, because a lot of times there are different like paywalls that we felt that we had to go through, and so having like the institutional login to, I don't know, just reduce that step and kind of consolidate all into one, we felt would make it easier as well.
Okay.
But that's all I got there.
Okay. Institutional login's a nice touch. I mean, I get a lot of emails almost every year saying, I can't get access to the papers. And I said, have you VPN in? Oh yeah, I forgot about that. So I really like that idea of giving people also the confidence that what you're looking at has been validated by this organization. So I think that from a mental model perspective, that's really, really strong to let people know who is okaying the results here, right? So for example, you go to Google Scholar, the results that you get back, you go, okay, Google is giving it the stamp of approval. So I think that's really, really good. Again, I think for this one, really thinking about how do beginning students start searching an area, I think is going to be something that's going to be important to think about. So I like the common HCI topics. So people might not know what are common topics. So I think that's a really smart thing to do, to be able to provide people topics. But HCI is such a broad field. So you might want to think about how do you allow somebody that there are a lot of people that might not be interested in, for example, VR. They're in HCI, but they might they think it's an interesting topic, but that's not what they want to search. How can you help personalize what are common topics? Because HCI is a very broad field. Other than that, I think some of the mental models still, I'd like to see something tighter about what you're bringing in over, that you're saying, hey, how am I mapping what a student might be thinking about to how they're going to process through this page. But that's my feedback. Mohan, do you have anything to add?
No, cover it well.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yep. And again, as you're talking about, so saving previous searches is a smart idea. I think that's it can be good, and I love the idea of little thumbnails. That's really, really smart, because for some people they're very visual, and that can help them remember what that paper is about. So that can be really good. That's a good job there.
Thank you.
So finding relevant research papers can be very tricky. One has to use the right keywords, the right publisher, which is often not easy. The interface should target a wide variety of users and should be simple for everyone. We designed our system to find research papers based on highly effective search options for the general audience. Users can search for papers based on tags and keywords alongside titles. They can narrow down their search to a particular field, and they can also select some topics or sectors. They can select publication and conference of the papers, and then they can apply some filters on the results like year, the author, etc. Users can also look for papers based on their activity, like recent papers, most read papers, and so on. While putting down our ideas on the canvas, we observed that most research paper publishing websites assume that the user already knows the field and knows what papers to search for. It is not a very efficient way to present information, as a considerable percentage of people that go to these websites are beginners or have limited knowledge about the field. To target this problem, we design an interface with curated reading paths for 3 levels of user expertise. That is beginner, intermediate, and expert. These reading paths will provide an overview of the field through community voted research papers. It will help users to make more informed searches. We also saw that there are minimal websites that have online communities to discuss problems or ideas. So we designed a community portal for users to interact with other users. They can suggest research papers, topics, and much more. Overall, most of the site functionalities work on community voting and user interaction. Thank you.
Okay. So let's start off with the strong points. I love that you've got multiple levels. That that's a great HCI principle to bring in there. Really, really sharp. I think that you've got really thinking about what do people know about. I like that the HCI papers that are currently getting popular to help students learn what is trending, right? So I think that is really it's great. Just some concerns here. I know these are mock-ups, but you don't want to distract people from mock-ups, right? So things such as, if you look at the authors, you've got Albert Einstein and Osama bin Laden. I know that you all are, just you got to be careful when you want to put in commentary or things, because people can get distracted by it. Google, for example, again, another opportunity for you to just keep it simple. Get people to focus on your ideas as opposed to try to get too cute or try to get too fancy with prototypes, because you don't want us to pay attention to that, right? You just want us to have their information there. So let's try to keep things like that simple as a tip for whenever you're doing prototypes, because people will get very hung up on it. Again, big picture, I like that you've got different levels. I like that you're thinking about what is it that people might know as a beginner. So I want to give you all highlights there. Just when you're creating prototypes, keep it simple. And avoid distracting the people with unnecessary elements. Okay.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Just to add to that, so the task was to create it for a novice user. So when you began the presentation, you started as like you wanted to support the wide audience. It's a wrong step to start when you're starting to design interface. Like Apollo has mentioned before, it's not ideal to design for the wide audience, and you have to start with one specific set of users and then try to address the needs of other users. So for beginners, yeah, that the different topics you listed, that's good. But if you say wide audience, then it might change for different type of audience too.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to group 5, please.
I'll be presenting for group 5. So the application of mental models in our system was twofold. One was where we had to apply those on the actual interface, and the second one was the task of searching for people. So as far as the interface goes, because the main idea was to search things, we had the search bar right in the middle of the screen. And we also had a filter by option for it. So if we go here, we have filter by author, conference, and topic, because this was something that was common among the mental models of everyone in our groups. So further, we also had conferences listed out, so you could choose either of them. And another mental model is to have an option to go back to your other filters. So we have an easy way to change the filters to say. And then we also have this menu at the top, which helps you access each of these individually. So if you just want to look at, if you're not sure where you want to start, you can just look at conferences, journals, an author, a topic, or a year. And then when you actually search for something, this screen comes up. There's paper title, author, conference, and year, which is the system that most of the search engines follow, for instance, Google Scholar as well. But most of our mental models also said that we look at the abstract first, and then based on that, we decide if we want to read the rest of the paper. So we have the similar functionality where if you hover over the paper title, it brings up the abstract. So you can just look at it in a glance and then decide if you want to actually click on the link and go to the hassle of actually accessing that paper. Yeah, that's all we have.
Okay. I like that you talk about people making decisions on abstracts. I think that that's really good. I like that you've got a very familiar interface, so people know when they look at that first one, their mental models, hey, this is going to look similar to a search engine, and there's some ways to filter them by. I think one of the things that if you think about the beginner and really helping somebody get started, a search topic, I get, yes, you have to have a search bar in there, I get it, but then people have a difficult time understanding, well, what do I put in there, right? And so I really wanted, I think that there's really just an opportunity, and that's not only for your group, I think for a lot of groups here, to say, how can we support a beginner? And Mohan raised a good point, and the reason why he chose beginners, because the needs of a beginner are different than the needs of, let's say, a fifth-year PhD student, right? And so we want to think about, instead of building that, this Mohan pointed out last, don't build an interface for everybody. It's almost the height of hubris to be thinking, I'm so savvy, I've got such great ideas, I can actually build something that's going to help everybody. The odds are really low, because if it was so strict, I mean, honestly, if it could have been done, it probably would have already been done, right? So when you focus on a specific group, such as beginners, what the interface needs to support is very different than somebody who's an expert, right? So that'd be the one thing, again, it's not just your group, but other groups, is that when you're building these interfaces, when you're talking about mental models, you all have to say, do people even know what to search for? Maybe you all are much smarter than me. When I first started searching for papers, it was overwhelming. I didn't know what conference, what's the difference between SIGGRAPH and TOG, for example, right? Or Chi, or a journal. Some of these journal titles are very confusing, right? So simply just being able to search and list them there doesn't support the user very much. That'd be the one thing I want to throw out for a lot of the groups here, is that you got to be thinking about supporting the user more than just providing a bunch of options. Remember, mental model is not about options, it's about supporting the user. Okay, all right, let's go and move on to the next one. All right, room 7.
Okay. I will be presenting for group 7.
Okay.
So it's pretty simple. We have some filters on the left. You can filter by year, by the journal, and we also have the option of creating our own account. So if you like a paper, you can download it, and then you can filter by the saved papers. Then when you click on a paper, it opens a small preview window where you can have a quick look at it. Then you can go to its source, you can download it, or you can mark it as, if you've already read it, you can mark it as read. And we have the credibility score down here and a link to read similar papers. And we can also sort by date / credibility score. And we also thought about adding more features and adding a separate page for like the account section, but I thought it wasn't required. So yeah, so the design is, we kept it pretty simple. And in case someone from my group wants to add something, they can.
I would like to add the search that we have created is it's for beginners. So you can search anything, like you want to search for title, directly keywords or authors. Based on this global search, it acts like a global search. Whatever you put in there, it will list down the related papers or journals, and more. And then you can see them by date, sort them by date or credibility score. And here the credibility score actually means means like it's based on the originality of the content. How original is it, based on the popularity of author and the number of citation that paper has got. So that's what we thought of. It's more like a impact factor of that paper. So that's the credibility score. And that's
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So a couple comments here. Number one, impact the credibility score. I think helping students understand which papers are more valuable than another paper is a really smart thought here. I like that, because students sometimes, many times, have difficulty understanding how much to weight a paper. I think that's really good. But here's a comment on your design. This is a paper around mental models, right? So you should be mapping over a conceptual process. What you are provided here, and a lot of other groups do this too, so I'm not picking only on you, is you've implemented a lot of features. So the goal isn't to map mental models to features. When you have a mental model, it's how people think about a problem, right? So when you think about, how do beginners think about searching? That's the question that's at hand. So when we generate a mental model, a lot of folks here, you all have pointed out a lot of features. And I want to highlight the goal. Remember back in the first set of lectures when I showed you the TV remote example and how there are tons of buttons on the TV remote? And I asked you, how many buttons have you created? How do you use? And most of us go, well, 20% of the buttons, right? So a lot of you have a lot of buttons on your screen. And it isn't that buttons are bad, but if we said, hey, are you helping a beginner? Would a beginner be able to come here and understand institutions? Do people even know where to search for which schools, right? So you have to start off. So I want to highlight that a lot of groups, not just yours, have a lot of features on your interface. And the goal isn't to make more features. The goal is to support a user. So you really need to think about, what does a beginner need? Not how many things can we put on the screen, because a beginner, if you remember when you first started looking for papers, this is a lot of stuff. Like, do they know should I be searching for Chi or ACMM or mobile Chi? How do I know? All right, so I want you to think about this as we move forward. And I give you this critique, not to lower, so it's not impacting your grade, right? But in terms of trying to give you feedback to improve your mental models and thinking, here, we want you to think about, hey, how am I supporting the user? What does the user need support with? What are their goals? How do they think about the problem? Not necessarily, here's a bunch of features that the user could use. Okay? All right, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone see my presentation? Okay, this is group 8. And
just as a note, if you can't see the presentation, I will tell you, so you never have to ask a question. Every group,
okay.
Every week.
Okay, thanks. This is group 8, and we are inspired by the concept of the mental model, and we considered the users tend to interpret and interact with the interface in different ways, and they tend to rely on prior experience when interacting with other existing interfaces. So we combined our group's mental models and designed our interface named research. So here, page 1, novice can search for any keyword in preferred conferences or objectives. Different users may have different objectives, so we categorized them in multiple purposes. So for example, explore the research area would return the high influential papers in the field, and the writer paper would return papers that with high citation numbers. Learn a concept would return papers that proposed this concept originally. And finally, learn about HCI methods would return the literature review papers that for the user to get started with. And if the user is unsure about which keyword to start with, we also provide this word cloud visualization that shows the keyword trending in the field with the hot areas in larger fonts. And we also provide a sign-in with your institute option at the top right. So here, after logged in, the user goes to page 2, which looks very similar to page 1, but as with 2 sidebars, shows the recent publications and popular publications from the same institution, because the users may feel interested in what his or her colleagues are working at. And if the user clicks paper, then we goes to page 3. Here we show the abstract, the keywords, and the related publications referenced by this paper. Also, we show the papers that published by the same authors group. And finally, if the paper is available online to view, we also provide a PDF view in the browser and provide a download option, as many databases did.
Okay. So I think this concept of really showing people what is possible is really, really good, right? So a beginner in HCI might not know that privacy and security is actually a big part of HCI, right? You might not, a lot of people probably don't know that. So I think that this is really good to show people what is possible. And so leveraging that, and then also leveraging, again, people you might be able to connect with quickly, because if somebody's at my own institution, I might be able to reach out to them they might be in my research group or nearby. It'd be very easy to help a beginner connect with somebody. If it's, again, looking at page 2, if a recent paper from my own institution, I would actually feel potentially easier to reach out to somebody at the University of Florida versus another place. So I want to throw out that you've got a lot of great concepts in here. I think from where can things be, and I like that the paper content is easily accessible. So recent publications, more from the authors. This is really a good way to help people explore a space. So I think you've got a really good explore a space concept here. I think helping students understand it can be a little overwhelming when there's just so many papers out there, and how do I know what the next step might be valuable to take? I think it's sort of helping a student along about saying, here's maybe a recommended, or here's a direction that we think that help you sort of take the next step, because there's a lot of information here. I could see that being potentially a lot for a beginning student to take in. But again, big feedback. Love your word cloud. Love that you've got the institution as a starting place, because it's a low barrier to reach out to those folks. Then if I said, hey, can you reach out to this professor from Stanford and ask for this? And you'd be, whoa, that feels like a bigger step than if I said, hey, can you reach out to Dr. Anthony and ask her about some topic, right? So good job there.
Yeah, just to add to that, like the slide kind of messed up my mental model. So people usually read left to right. I was looking at like, why does it start from title 3? So that's a good example of like what can happen if you don't follow the mental model.
Thank you.
All right. Group 9.
Hi, I'm going to be presenting for Group 9. So the way we designed this interface is by walking through everyone's mental models and noticing things that we all had in common when trying to search for papers for the first time. Most of us use Google Scholar or the UF library system, so a lot of our features are emulated off features that we found useful within those websites. So first, as a lot of other groups, a lot of us search by keywords, titles, when we don't really know the exact paper that we're looking for. So we made that a central point of our model, and over here it's just a drop down. It's the same thing. And to aid new users, we created a feature that has recommended keywords or relevant keywords that might be close or related to what they might have searched in order to aid furthering their search. So another thing that we all had in common was that we all read the abstract before we decide whether or not to read a paper. So we made the abstract the front point of all of the article cards that show up after a search, so that the user is easily able to read the abstract before deciding to read it. And a lot of us also noted that we like to kind of batch search before reading all the papers. We don't search and read, search and read. So we have an add to library so that if they read the abstract and they think that they might enjoy the paper, they can add it to the library and read it later, since that's kind of the process that we all followed. And for this assignment, one of the main considerations for our new user was that the publication was published in Kai. So we do have a little legend system here that shows which of the articles were published in Kai so that they can see that very clearly. Of course, that could be adapted to any other type of publication or anything that our new user is interested in. So yes, that is our
Can you move over to the other screen just to take a look?
Yes, this is the same screen. It's just a drop down to choose between keyword, author, article title when searching.
Okay. Yeah, so I think this is, I liked how you talked about how you're leveraging your shared experiences in finding papers, and the point about saying batch reading, supporting that. I think that is sort of searching first and then breaking it down. I think that's a great point. That's very clearly. I like the bookmarks. These are very commonly used concepts. So you're really leveraging a lot of people's familiarity with icons, but also concepts. And the one thing I would say for beginners, knowing how to get started in this space, there could be an opportunity there. Again, I think everybody's very, very different, but when I get my first, when their students are first starting with me, sometimes it's very hard because I'll say, hey, go search for certain terms or go search for papers in this area. And it's hard for them to really know how to get started with that. It's such a vague concept. So I think thinking about that, and then also if articles are connected to each other, there could be some opportunities there with your interface to say, hey, if I like this article, these other articles might also make sense too, if you're gonna do a batch search. So that's oftentimes what happens in these search things, right? So if you find one, it'll show you similar or relevant papers. And if you're gonna do that way to search for papers, I think that might be a strong way to add more to your reading list. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. But good use of talking about how your mental models informed your decisions so that it was clear for us to see why those elements are there.
Thank you.
Good job. All right, last group of the day. We're right on time. That doesn't mean that you should wait to share. Okay.
Hi, I'm presenting for group 10. So like most of you, we followed the same process. So we came together and discussed our individual mental models and saw the things that we had in common. And one of the most essential, one of the key things was we all had the idea of searching through using a web process. So we did apply the process view of searching, and most of us had the idea of going through Google Scholar because it's easier, and that's one of the first things that comes to people's mind when you say go search for something on the web. So to make it more easier to find HCI related papers, we thought it would be easier to have a HCI focused kind of a web search, Scholar search page. And then below it, we also have this different conferences. And the reason why we had those conferences is to make it easy, just in case if you had an interest in a particular conference like Kai, you could just easily select that conference and go through it and start seeing the papers for that conference instead of getting searching the keywords and then seeing all the papers that pop up from all different conferences. And we also have like trending buttons for like this trending session for things that are trending in the HCI community and as well. So if you go through searching and you focus on Kai papers, the papers pop up in the list. As most of us are aware with the way Google Scholar works, the papers will come up and the title will come up and there'll be a little description. But when you hover on the title, it would show the abstract. So we added that because we thought it's important for people to be able to read some part of the abstract to give them an idea of what the paper is. So to determine whether or not they want to continue reading the paper. We also added here to be able to sort the papers by years. So if you wanted to search papers that are from CHI conference from this year, or so you know what is more relevant in the community as well. So the reason why we use this process view is because from the paper that we read, the process view was more common for people, for a lot of new people searching on the web. And the reason why is because it was, people spend more time, the most time doing that. And from the searches that happened in the paper as well, that they performed best while searching using that process view mental model. And yeah, so that's why we did that.
Okay. So again, the strongest thing I think with yours is that it's got a very clear mapping to Google, right? So when people look at that first page, it's clear, like, hey, you're going to use a Google structure. I think, and trending is a nice start. I think that's really supporting what a beginner, and this is where a lot of testing would have. He says search only in, again, beginning students might struggle with what to search for, what the different conferences even mean. I think supporting a beginner is really one of the things to think about here. What is the beginner's mental model, right? So that would be my main feedback on this. It's a very clean interface. I think it's very clear to get to items. I like the abstract preview, but really focusing on how does a beginner benefit from this interface over an expert, for example. And that could actually be one thing that I think for a lot of people that I saw today is it should be super clear why a beginner would benefit using this interface versus, let's say, an intermediate and expert. I mean, I'm not saying intermediate and expert wouldn't also benefit, but what is the clear boost that the beginner is going to get, right? I think that that's something to be very, very clear. So if you're going to design for an interface for a certain population, it should be very specific, very clear. Boom, here's why this group will benefit from that, and that's going to help crystallize your thinking so that you don't just build more features. More features doesn't necessarily mean a better interface, right? It's really helping people achieve their goals. So it's a goal achievement versus feature development. Okay. So that's my feedback to you all. It's, again, a very clean interface based on Google. I like that. I think that there's an opportunity to really say, how does this help beginners? And I think that that's not just your group, that's really a lot of groups here to really focus on the user. And that's why we're going through this and giving you lots of feedback as you're coming out with ideas. And this is only week 2, but in terms of paper reading, but as we go through more and more designs, I really want to start to see us move away from features, which is the way a lot of us think about, because we have to think, how do we code it? How are we meeting users' needs, right? Okay, so next week, I think that's what we really want to focus on, Mohan, is we give them tasks, and we want to make sure the tasks are completable on Wednesday by the end of a class. Don't want you to feel the need to meet after class. So let's make sure that we give them the tasks and make sure that they know that they can be done, but really have them focus on the user goals and making sure that it's clear to us on Friday what the user goals are and how your system is meeting that need. All right.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Again,